Good morning, everyone. Hope you guys had a good weekend. Um, how about let's get started. So, you should have already filled out the attendance form. Today's due now is what makes up a good question? So, what does it mean to ask a good question, right? And why do you think those are the necessary components to a good question? What are some examples of good questions that you can think of? So, this might have been a little confusing. However, that's the focus that we have today. So, the aim is how do we develop strong questions to keep our arguments focused? So, looking at the bigger picture, all of you should have completed your controversial figure presentation, right? That's where you've done your research on somebody who you found really interesting based on the controversy surrounding them. So you've done some research about this particular person, and now what we're going to be doing is writing an argumentative essay on that controversial figure. Okay, so this is where our inquiry-based learning is coming into play this unit. So you guys need to come up with your own argumentative question. So now that we're in the second semester, that's one way of growing as students, is not just having the teacher give you a question and you write about it, but now you yourselves have to come up with your argumentative question. However, we need to make sure that you're writing good quality questions in order to actually be able to write a whole essay on it. So that's what we're going to be going over today. Before we do, some of you guys might not have heard of the word inquiry before. So the example sentence here is further inquiry revealed that the Yeezys being sold online were actually fake, right? So if I'm going to look into something, if it's either fake or real, you have to investigate it, right? So inquiry, the definition is an act of asking for information, right? So whether it's asking or exploring or researching, you're in search for specific information. So through searching, right, you're going to be asking questions in order to reveal that specific information. So inquiry is the focus for today, is finding a good inquiry question. So finding a good argumentative essay question in which you can do research for your argumentative essay. So your homework is you're going to write 5 questions. Your controversial figure inspires, and then from there we're going to try and narrow it down to one argumentative essay question. However, the more the better at this point, because then we can narrow down to what is it the best essay question for you to write about, in which has the information available. So today we're learning about the different DOK levels, which are depth of knowledge levels, in order to track your thinking level of your questions. So we're going to go over that right now. Just make sure you're coming up with 5 questions that your controversial figure inspires. So it can be, for example, for O.J. Simpson, right? Is O.J. Simpson innocent of the crimes that he committed, right? So that's an example. It's definitely a weaker example, but we're going to go into how to ask good DOK level. So, like I said, DOK stands for depth of knowledge, and it categorizes tasks according to the complexity of thinking required to successfully complete that particular question or task. So remember, the focus is complexity. It doesn't mean that the higher the level, the more difficult the question. It's just the level of complexity, which we'll go into. So level 1 is a recall and reproduction level. So for DOK level 1, you're just recalling information. So there's various verbs that you guys can use. And when you notice in the, if you look on the left, students will be able to, SWBAT, right? Today it says apply Webb's depth of knowledge into their own argumentative essays. And then it also identify the 4 levels of DOK. So if you notice, right, the verbs in the picture, it says arrange, calculate, define, draw, identify, list, label, illustrate, match, memorize, recognize, and tell. So here we have identify. For students will be able to, today you are going to be able to identify those 4 levels. That means that is a DOK level 1. Because you're going to be able to recall that information. Something to note, right? There's one correct answer for DOK level 1 questions. And yeah, so that it's a behavior sequence of behaviors learned through practice, and they're easily performed. So we'll give examples, but at the end, if I was to say, what are the 4 DOK levels, right? There is one specific answer, and you should be able to identify the correct ones, right? So, however, complexity, if I was to ask you, list all the bones in the body, that's also recalling information. However, that is really difficult to do, right? However, they both still fall under DOK level 1 because it's recalling that particular information. For DOK level 2, that focuses on skills and concepts. So for those, the verbs are categorize, cause and effect, classify, compare, distinguish, estimate, graph, interpret, modify, predict, relate, show, and summarize. So it's essentially explaining how or why to particular questions. So if you remember, when you guys give answers, a lot of times I'll ask why, right? Why is that the correct answer? And then you have to explain it in your own words. That would be assessing your ability to distinguish that particular skill or concept. So on the right-hand side, I have the engagement of some mental processing beyond recalling. So the use of information or conceptual knowledge requires making some decisions regarding how to approach a question or a problem. So there's still one correct answer. However, it requires maybe a couple steps in regards to not just recalling, but also explaining your answer. So that's DOK level 2. DOK level 3, that's strategic thinking. So it'll ask you to assess, cite evidence, also compare, conclude, construct, critique, develop logical argument, differentiate, formulate, hypothesize, investigate, and revise. So this is where most of your essay questions should fall under, is a DOK level 3. Because it requires strategic thinking, right? So it's more sophisticated reasoning and analysis. It requires deep understanding, and it requires you to solve problems and draw conclusions, which is perfect for an argumentative essay, right? So this is where you are going to have to do research. There is no right answer, right? So there can be multiple answers, and that's why you have to do your research and take a position on one side. That's strategic thinking. There's one more, and that is level 4, which is extended thinking. So it requires an integration of knowledge from multiple sources and ability to represent knowledge in a variety of ways. Usually requires work over an extended period of time. So like I said, your argumentative essay questions will fall under a DOK level 3 or a DOK level 4. So DOK level 4s, the verbs are apply concepts, analyze, connect, create, critique, design, prove. So a lot of you guys in science class, when you have to go through the whole inquiry process and make a hypothesis, right? And then do your experiments and then do your studies, right? That would all fall under extended thinking because it requires multiple steps, right? And then also similar for your argumentative essays, you're also taking that inquiry-based approach, which requires multiple steps. So level 4. This is where we would have a class discussion on these questions or this information. However, just for you guys to reflect as I go through these. So what are the 4 levels of depth of knowledge questions? Like I said, you're recalling that information. So that would be a DOK level 1 question. The how would you summarize each level? So that is a DOK level 2 question because you're putting it into your own words, right? So it's still the same, there's only one right answer to it. However, the way you guys explain it may be different. So that requires a little more thinking than just recalling that information. So the how or the why questions. And then the last question, how are DOK questions related to your argumentative questions that you have to create for homework? So that is a DOK level 3 question because now, right, it all depends on first, who is your controversial figure. So everybody's going to have a different person, right? So there can be multiple answers to this particular question, and it also requires multiple steps. So now you're comparing your understanding of the DOK levels and your understanding of your controversial figure, as well as your understanding of argumentative essays and the questions that are asked. So there's multiple steps to this one question that we have here. So reflect on each of these questions as we go through. Remember, you can always pause the video in order to go over this information. So in a Google form, you're going to have your independent work for today. It's going to be a list of questions, and then you have to identify which DOK level pertains to each question. So that is the classwork for today. And then as well as the exit ticket will also be on the same Google form. So before you submit it, answer the question, how does using DOK levels in your questions enrich and deepen a reader's understanding of your argument? So essentially, why is it important to have a DOK level 3 or 4 in order to have a solid argumentative essay? All right, everyone. So that is today's lesson. Remember, you can always reach out to me on Remind or Google Classroom. I'll also be setting up some office hours. So in case you want to have some one-on-one time, if this assignment is confusing in any way, or just have additional questions, we can have a conference that way. Okay. So hope you guys have a good day today. I'm going to stop sharing the screen and let me know if you have any questions. All right. Bye-bye.